Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Ukrainian Justice Minister Herman Lushenko has been suspended over a $100 million kickback scheme linked to Energoatom, reportedly involving a close ally of President Zelenskyy. The scandal breaks as Ukrainians face power cuts and Western allies demand stronger anti-corruption reforms. Joining us for insight is Myroslava Gongadze, non-resident senior fellow for peace, security and defence at Friends of Europe. Myroslava, thank you very much for taking the time to join us, and welcome.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay, so just give us some bare outlines of what this corruption scandal is about. $100 million, at least, I understand. A lot of money. What happened?
So basically, the anti-corruption agencies that were established really after the Revolution of Dignity and worked out their system started this investigation apparently almost 2 years ago. And we just learned that there was now the close ally to President Zelenskyy was involved in basically stealing some energy resources or getting kickback from the energy system of Ukraine. It's a very kind of usual case and was a usual case when Russia was using corruption in Ukraine to control the country. And basically this looks like similar, because some people who were involved in the scandal had some Russian connection, as we learned from this investigation. However, it does not say that that Ukrainians were not involved and the close people to the president of Ukraine were not involved.
Right. Well, that's interesting. You say they had Russian connections. What does that imply? What does that say to you?
There is a discussion on the... there is a so-called Mindich tapes. So Mindich is the name of the person who was close ally to Zelenskyy, who was involved in this corruption scheme. So basically there's a tapes. The anti-corruption agency were recording them through a long period of time. And in those tapes, there are discussions about giving money or giving some kind of like a code name to Moscow. So there are definitely some kind of Russian connection to some of the money and some of the cover of that corruption scheme.
So some of the money may have been going to Russia and funding the war. Okay, now there's some very senior figures involved in this. Of course, ministers of justice and energy have been asked to step down from their roles, but there are others. Now, this is a major cause for concern, isn't it? That at such a high level, there is this level of corruption. It does give the European Union pause for thought, doesn't it, when considering the accession of Ukraine into the EU?
It's definitely have a concern, and I'm hearing from Brussels colleagues that they are. It's a bad news for Ukraine. We will see how this will develop, because I think it's what it shows, what this corruption scandal shows, that Ukrainian society, Ukrainian institutions are working. If not, civil society of Ukraine, Ukrainian president, I would like to remind everyone that in July there was an attempt in Ukrainian parliament to limit the ability of anti-corruption agency to work. So Ukrainian people, young Ukrainian people, went on the street despite the war, demanded to change that law back, and Zelenskyy actually accepted that demand, and they actually changed.
And the EU also asked for it.
EU as well. So then that was why I'm saying it. I'm saying it because it looks like anti-corruption institutions still, despite the war, despite all the cover-up, despite everything, doing their work. So they are investigating corruption. If they have evidence of corruption, we know about them. It's not like somebody is covering up and nobody is talking about it. This is important show of democratic society, every society have corruption, but when it's become public and when it's investigated, it's a very important sign. However, I have to say here again, it's all will depend on the results of that investigation. Would we have people convicted in the crime? The question why the Mindich, the Zelenskyy close ally, was able to leave the country.
Are we sure he's actually left?
That's how it sounds like he left.
Right.
The country.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it depends what happens. You're absolutely right. But talking of what happens, I mean, there are two things. The first is that, as you said just a minute ago, there was an attempt to bring Nobu, the security, the corruption watchdog, under government control, yes. And it was because of that there were these demonstrations.
Looks like
okay, but the point is, surely that in itself is a bad sign, isn't it? That attempt was made.
It's a bad sign. Again, it's a bad sign and good sign that because of societal pressure, it was reversed. So, what I'm trying to say that despite everything, Ukraine is fighting two wars. Ukraine is fighting the war with like Russian aggression, the external enemy, and the Ukraine as a society fighting the internal enemy, the corruption. That's what Ukraine is always asking for. Was asking for. Justice is the main kind of point what Ukrainian society is about. They want to have a self-determination, they want to have justice, they want to have the results of their, better life in the end of the day, right?
Sure.
It looks like the society as the country is alive because they are fighting. They're fighting two wars, but they're weak, they're tired, but they're still
they keep going.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So how is the average person on the street seeing this as it unfolds? How much blame are they laying at Zelensky's door?
They are laying a lot of blame on Zelenskyy. And again, there is some, as you mentioned, some attempt to kind of give some results to the population, because obviously people are very disappointed. Zelenskyy, who came to power on with the flags saying no corruption, or he made a lot of statements about that he would be different president than others. Now he is actually looks like possibly could be involved in some kind of corruption scheme. So for the society, it's a very disappointing, and many would say that he, at this point, a lame duck president.
He's a lame duck president, certainly facing inwards. But what about facing outwards in terms of EU accession? How is he going to be seen when he goes to Brussels, when he goes to Washington?
It's all depend on his action. If he will do what it takes, actually get rid of people who are involved in those scandals, who are involved in corruption, clean up his surroundings, his circle, do some due diligent work, invite to the government proper experts, he can actually recover from this story. But he will recover only if he will do what it takes.
Right. On the 4th of November, one of your colleagues, Peter Dickinson, wrote an article in the Atlantic Council magazine that the EU was complimenting Ukraine on its progress towards meeting accession standards. However, did point out that there was some work left to do on the corruption front. So timing-wise, here we are, just couple of weeks later.
2 weeks ago.
And this thing blows up. What does President Zelenskyy have to do now when he goes to talk to the European Union, and he goes to talk to Brussels and say that, look, I get it, the timing is, the optics are terrible, but it's all under control. What does he need to do?
I mean, I don't think all would be under control, but his government probably has to be reshuffled. He has to be clean himself. He has to be open to his partners. I mean, in the end of the day, Ukraine needs support. Ukraine needs a lot of support. He has to establish some kind of mechanism, a better mechanism, and that's what European Union is asking.
Right.
Make a reforms, accountability process, and that's it. There's not much to do. It's just do what needed to do in a reform agenda.
Right. So it's a clean house and set up some controls. Okay. Now, in terms of military and other support that is coming into Ukraine, is there a risk that donors are going to say, well, hang on a second, we're not sure that this is actually going to go where it's needed? How much of this is going to be stolen and sold and, you know, enter the black market and the money going God knows where?
We don't have evidence of selling or I don't know, stealing the military equipment. Not such evidence. We have evidence of energy resources, yes. So far, all the military support, as experts say, we're going whatever they have to go to the front line and used as a tool to fight Russian aggression. However, there may be a question, because in the Ministry of Defense there were scandals as well, of corruption scandals, but it's all more involved in procurement process internally in Ukraine. So yes, those questions will be asked. However, we all have to understand that Ukraine is fighting not just for Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting for Europe. It's a front line of security of Europe, and that's needed to be.
It's a bumpy road. There's no doubt, and certainly the European countries kind of see that. But we do have a bit of a challenge across the Atlantic, don't we? With Trump kind of wavering, pro and you know, Putin pro Zelenskyy. So and there are voices in America which are only just beginning to come around and be supportive of Ukraine. And again, this happens. Do you think those waters can be calmed?
We will see. So far, America is very preoccupied with their own problems, with the government shutdown, with all of this. I was watching American media. Not much so far went. I mean, a little bit of coverage, but
it is going. Yeah,
but it will eventually.
It will eventually. Well, we'll be watching carefully for that. Thank you very much indeed for coming along and sharing your analysis with our audience.
Thank you.
Miroslava. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, though. As always, lots more coming up. Goodbye.